Imagine the cops rolling up to your land at sunrise because your HOA president said your grapevines are a public menace. What would you do if your own neighborhood board tried to crush your family business just to flex? Yeah, breathe deep. 'Cause this one's gonna get spicy. Dawn in Solstice Valley comes in soft, like a quilt laid over the hills. I'm out there with pruning shears, coffee steaming in my left hand, dew still clinging to the leaves. Then I hear its sirens. Faint at first, then louder. Riding the fog like bad news. Boots crunch the fallen leaves. Radios hiss. And there she is, Karen Hartwell, HOA president. Phone up. Smile tight. Recording like she's about to win some reality show. Her perfume hits before her logic does. She's smirking, while two officers step past the fence line. And I'm standing there thinking, you really want to do this on my dirt, on my granddad's rose, you sure? Anyway, let me back up. 'Cause, you know, none of this nonsense happens in a vacuum. My name's Marcus Thornfield. A few years back, I was a corporate attorney in San Francisco. Billing obscene hours. Eating dinners out of takeout boxes. And wearing suits that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Then my life did what lives do. Sometimes it cracked. My marriage blew apart. Turns out my ex decided my law partner had better jokes or better something. The divorce spun me like a tumbleweed and emptied my accounts faster than a Las Vegas weekend. What I had left was a farmhouse with floors that groaned like arthritic knees. A loyal German shepherd named Beryl, who treated every delivery truck like a personal insult. And 40 acres of vines. My grandfather started in the early 1960s, back when neighbors minded their business. And fences were for keeping deer out, not dignity in. I left the glass towers and moved into the creaky house with the peeling porch and the stubborn water heater. After years of boardrooms and backstabs, waking up to the sweet green smell of the valley felt healing. Hard work. Yes, but honest. The place needed love. Irrigation that belonged in a museum. Tractors older than disco. Trellis wire that snapped if you looked at it wrong. But it was my family's legacy. And I was going to honor it. Enter Karen. If you bred a law degree with a crusade and wrapped it in a white SUV, you'd get Karen Hartwell. She's the crown-wearing queen of Solstice Heights. A subdivision that sprouted on the edge of the valley like beige fungus. Her husband, Preston, is a developer with a handshake slicker than motor oil. Cranking out copy-paste mansions for folks who think grapes are lawn decor. She's got the clipboard. She's got the tone. She's got the we have standards smile that could curdle milk. Trouble started over a fence. I replaced a tired old line with standard agricultural wire clean. Sturdy. Safe enough to keep wandering party guests off the county road and hungry deer off the Pinot. I'm setting posts when Karen clicks up in heels like she's inspecting a crime scene. That fence violates our aesthetic guidelines, she says. I lean on my shovel. Ma'am, this is a working farm. Been that way longer than your subdivision's been breathing. She tilts her head. This is a residential neighborhood. Rules are rules. The word residential falls out of her mouth like a verdict. 2 days later, I get the letter. Thick paper. Fancy letterhead. Lots of bold. Cease and desist. Unauthorized agricultural structures. Threats of daily fines. And the county inspector CC'd for theatrical flair. She even copied my bank. God bless her, and the local paper for dessert. This wasn't a complaint. this was a campaign. Here's where people forget who I used to be. Before I learned the pleasure of dirt under my nails, I specialized in real estate law. I know this game and the folks who play it. And I also know farms like mine wear certain legal armor, agricultural exemptions, heritage protections, old deed language with sharp little teeth. So while Karen is out there playing mall cop with bylaws, I'm in the farmhouse at the kitchen table. Papers spread like maps, barrel at my feet, and my coffee gone cold. I call my buddy from law school, Jake Morrison, environmental attorney. Attitude, like a bulldog. He laughs. That gravelly laugh I've missed. Marcus, he says. Someone just poked a sleeping bear. That weekend I raid my granddad's dusty filing cabinet. The paper smells like history and mildew. I sneeze. Curse. Keep reading. And there it is, in a manila folder marked in his cranky handwriting. The original deed and an agricultural exemption, perpetual farming rights. Fancy way of saying, this land was born to grow, and no HOA gets to pretend otherwise. I write back polite. Precise. Armed to the molars with citations, and send copies everywhere. Karen sent hers. County. Bank. Local editor. Then, like clockwork, a county inspector shows up. Good man. Apologetic smile. Says he's required to walk it all. We stroll the property while the breeze lifts the leaves and the afternoon light makes the rose glow. He checks the barn that predates half of the town. He checks the equipment shed that my granddad built to code when I was still thinking homework mattered more than harvest. He checks the root cellar older than him. You're solid, he says at last. Your exemptions are clear. Whoever sent this complaint doesn't understand rural law. Aha! And whoever sprayed that expensive perfume all over the letter is named Karen. But the fence was just the opening jab. An emergency HOA board meeting pops up, community beautification. Language vague enough to be sneaky. I show up. The room smells like carpet cleaner and anxiety. Karen runs the table with her little head bob chorus behind her. Slideshows about neighborhood character. And a petition dripping with performative concern about, wait for it, commercial agriculture threatening harmony. Then something gorgeous happens. Old-timers stand up. People whose kids played under my vines and borrowed tools from my granddad. Marcus's family was here before any of this, says a retired teacher with a voice like a gavel. The vineyard is what makes this valley feel like a valley. And for a second, just one Karen's face cracks. But power hates losing. So if she can't beat me with rules, she'll try to break me with rumors. Her Facebook group, Concerned Neighbors of Solstice, lights up like a brush fire. Stray photos. Ugly captions. Delivery trucks. Speeding. Noise. Flies. Pure fiction dressed up as concern. Folks I've known for years start looking through me at the hardware store. My bank suddenly needs more documentation. You ever feel the air shift? Like the temperature in a room drops while the thermostat swears it didn't that? When people start acting weird, I start researching. Late nights. County records. Coffee, like paint stripper. Preston. It turns out, owns more land than most folks realize. Several developments built. More in the hopper. And he's been sniffing around farmland like a shark. And the math. It's simple and ugly. Ag land sells for peanuts. Rezone it. And bean counters start salivating. My 40 acres would turn into a jackpot if I broke. I hire a surveyor and order a title search that goes back to when cows outnumbered commuters. The results make me laugh loud enough to scare Barrel off his rug. Turns out my property line runs 50 feet deeper into the subdivision than the developers bothered to remember, right through the edge of 3 backyards. My granddad granted construction easements back in the day, but kept the dirt. Classic farm move, rent the rights. Keep the soil. There's more, a utility easement threading this valley, like a spine roads. Lines. Water legal corridors nobody can block, even if they crow about standards. Karen holds a safety meeting. Bless her heart. About the dangers of grape farming. The signatures on her petition look like they were penned by the same nervous wrist. I sit in the back and let her talk herself into a corner. She doesn't know it. But the board is already wobbling. People can smell panic. It's like gasoline. So she brings in the big guns, a thick cease and desist from a law firm with a name that screams leather chairs. They demand I shut down commercial activities in 72 hours, or face the wrath noise ordinances. Traffic. The whole phone book of misapplied codes. It's designed to scare a normal farmer to tears. Problem for them is, I ain't normal. I've spent a decade and a half drafting and dodging shots like these. Still, legal war burns money. And divorce left me counting every dime. One long fight could bankrupt me without ever seeing a courtroom. That's the playbook. Bleed the target till the target sells. Seen it 100 times. Coast to coast. So, I go hunting for the bigger lever. The courthouse is a maze of dust and drawers. And the clerk, Ethel, hands like paper and steel, has been there since the Nixon days. She watches me dig for a while, and finally asks what ghost I'm chasing. I tell her about the whispers I'd heard. An old designation. Something about a heritage district. Her eyes spark. Oh. That kerfuffle. She disappears and comes back with a file that looks like it survived a flood and a bonfire. Someone misfiled it decades ago. Inside. The Motherlode, a historic agricultural designation from the late 1980s that wraps Solstice's original vineyards in barbed wire made of law. Any development within certain distances needs environmental studies. Water and soil impact reviews the kind of paperwork that doesn't just slow bulldozers. It turns them around. I cross-reference permits. I check filings. I check again. And my hands start to shake, not from fear, but from the sort of adrenaline that makes a lawyer remember why he ever took the bar. Preston's projects don't have what they're supposed to have. Like? At all. Homes sold on paperwork that isn't worth the toner. That's not oops, that's a pattern. Here's where I pause and say this the careful way in my opinion. Based on the documents I saw and the expertise I've got. It looked like a fraud scheme, big enough to need its own zip code. Buyers may have been sold something that, legally, wasn't what they were told it was. And the people pushing Karen to push me, they had reasons, oh boy, reasons to keep a loudmouth farmer lawyer from digging. So I switch from defense to offense. I call Jake. He says the word that makes developers sweat racketeering. I loop in Dr. Sarah Bennett, a soil scientist from the State University, with a voice like a bell and a brain like a scalpel. She walks my rows at sunrise, kneels, pinches earth, talks about water tables and herons and how the valley breathes. What she sees from the grading and the septic lines on those hills. She calls it vandalism, the kind that takes years to heal. Then I bring in Father Miguel from Down Valley, who's been helping farm families hold the line against what he calls the locusts of luxury. He's seen this play in 3 counties bully the farms, rezone the dirt, Have the memory. We set a schedule. Cameras go up on my fence lines, not just for safety, but for evidence. Every call from a concerned neighbor, every white SUV creeping past after dark, gets logged. Miguel talks to families who felt pressure like I did. Some sold under duress. Some nearly did. Stories pile up like sandbags. Meanwhile, Karen's campaign gets nastier. My irrigation lines are cut one night clean. Precise. Way too tidy to be an accident. Anonymous calls spook my wedding clients with lies about contamination. Fake reviews sprout on the internet like mushrooms after rain, vinegar wine. Food poisoning. Lawsuits. It's almost artful how shameless it is. Almost. Jake files for a restraining order. A thick stack of do-nots that tells HOA reps and their agents to knock it off or answer to a judge. Sarah builds a report that reads like a forensics file, maps with colored overlays. Tables that scream at you with numbers. Photos that can make a jury frown. Miguel lines up statements. Knots people together into something like a movement. Here's the thing about bullies when their script stops working. They sprint to the finale. Preston shows up one fog-heavy morning with a briefcase and a salesman grin that looks brittle. He offers a settlement cash that would make most folks blink for a quick sale. 48 hours to sign. 48 hours to shut up. He says it's for everyone's good. And his voice has that tremble rich men get when the tides turn. I tell him no in words he can't quote in church. He leans in and says, I don't understand what I'm up against. And what he doesn't know is that I've been recording for my safety. For clarity, with federal guidance. The same Rodriguez who'd walked my rows with a clipboard is now working a very different side of the street. And the tape hears every threat. Every expiration. Every little slip that a jury might, find interesting. By then, the valley's split. Half the farmers stand with me. Reporters start sniffing around local stations first. Then state folks who like awards. Buyers get nervous about houses built on paper that might not hold. I hear the phrase loan freeze in a bank lobby and try not to smile where the cameras can see. Karen, she's fraying. You can watch it happen like overbaked sugar. Her posts get stranger. Her rants louder. She starts picking fights in parking lots. Even the faithful start backing away, 'cause nobody wants to be on a sinking paddleboard holding a bullhorn. Jake lands the masterstroke, a mediation at town hall. Neutral setting. Civility. Cameras by accident. State people observing. I spend the night before walking the rows. Hand trailing the leaves. Barrel, thumping my leg with his tail. Sarah's at my table with charts. Miguel's on the phone, reassuring tired families that this is worth it. Ethel, the clerk, calls to say, gentle as a grandma, honey, bring the good copies. The place is standing room only the next day. You can feel the heat in the air, even with the aircon buzzing. Karen rolls in, dressed like she's suing humidity. Preston comes with lawyers and luggage under his eyes. The mediator taps a mic, and the whole room goes quiet, except for pens scratching and cameras humming. Karen goes first, the greatest hits. Rules. Harmony. Public safety. She waves a petition like it's holy writ. Preston follows, calling himself a peacemaker, offering to relieve me of my commercial burdens with a fair offer. I let them talk. I let them smile. Then, I stand up, open a folder thick enough to use as a doorstop, and tell the valley a story not mine, not theirs, ours, about old land grants and perpetual rights, about easements and lines people forgot to check, about laws designed to protect food and water, and the small miracles of place, about filings missing where filings should be, about patterns that, in my opinion, look like more than oversight. I show charts. I show maps. I show the letter where the words don't match the law. And then I say the quiet part, not quiet carefully, so even folks in the back row can hear it. I say the state's been looking into some things. I say the feds have questions. I say names. I can say and keep back what I can't. And when I glance at the doors, and those doors open, and badges catch the fluorescent lights, and the room breathes in like a chorus, well, there's a feeling you don't forget. It tastes like cold iron and mercy. It looks like relief on a neighbor's face. Karen drops the mask. She yells that I'm a liar, that I'm ruining her neighborhood. But the thing about truth is, once it starts running downhill, it carries everything with it. Excuses, posturing, carefully curated timelines, all of it. I wish I could tell you that was the end. But suburban wars don't end, they shift. After that night, Karen's throne wobbles, friends unfriend, the board fractures, Preston's projects stall, banks start asking for the paperwork that was supposed to exist in the first place. And suddenly, people who called me a nuisance are calling me sir, asking how they can help. Meanwhile, we build. Miguel's barn meetings turn into a weekly circle farmers with thermoses and stories and stubborn hope. Sarah walks kids through the rows and says, "This is how soil breathes." And you can see their eyes light like they just met a dragon. Jake, God love him, keeps filing injunctions here, notices there, keeping the gears honest. And me, I get up before sunrise, walk the rows, talk to my granddad, out loud, sometimes, like a fool. We're okay. I tell him, we're gonna be okay. Beryl looks up, cocks his head like he agrees. I'm not gonna lie, fear still knocks on the door some nights. But I've learned something old and simple, that a place can hold you up if you let it. And people will surprise you if you give them a chance. Karen still drives past sometimes, slower than the speed limit. Windows up, shoulders tight. Maybe she's looking for an angle that isn't there anymore. Maybe she's just listening for sirens that ain't coming. So, what would you do if your HOA tried to choke out a family farm to make way for beige castles? Would you sell? Would you fold? Or would you HOA, sharpen your shears and start reading your deed, line by line? Anyone else had a HOA try this mess on you? Drop your story below. Seriously. Your comment might hand another family the courage and the receipts they need. What if the people meant to protect property values were quietly draining the soul out of your town, one letter, one rumor, one fine at a time? That's the part nobody warns you about. It ain't just grass heights and mailbox paint. It's pressure. It's loneliness. It's power used like a hammer on folks who don't deserve the bruise. The morning after that mediation, I walked the lower rows with Beryl trotting ahead, tail doing its lazy metronome. Fog lay low, silvering the world. I touched the vines and felt the sap pushing up. Stubborn as any prayer, my phone kept buzzing. Neighbors, reporters, a cousin who hadn't called since my wedding that didn't stick. I turned it face down on a fence post and listened to birds rewrite the day. By noon, the HOA blasted out an emergency bulletin. New temporary rule. No commercial events allowed within the HOA boundaries. Effective immediately. to preserve safety and tranquility. Translation: they wanted my weddings, farm dinners, and tasting nights dead before sunset. The email dripped with words like harmony, cherish, community words that taste sweet when honest and like cough syrup when weaponized. I made coffee so strong it could jumpstart a tractor. Then I opened a folder stamped with county permits in cheerful ink. See, weeks before, I'd filed for everything a cautious man could file for: noise, traffic, sanitation, parking. I've met people like Karen. The county signed off twice. The farm's historic designation held. The new HOA rule wouldn't trump a single line of the law. Still, I called my brides and grooms personally. "You're safe," I said, voice calm even as my heart drum kicked. "Wear legal. Bring dancing shoes." Most of them laughed. Embry. One or two cried from relief. Fear, it turns out, is a lousy wedding planner. Friday night. The fairy lights glowed like a constellation stitched over the barn, and the band tuned up with a riff from a love song so old the moon probably knew the chords. Barrel wore a bow tie he hated. Dr. Rizaldi, Bennett's husband, roasted chickens till the air tasted like heaven. Father Miguel prayed a quiet blessing over the couple, just a whisper, not a show, and my neighbor Rosie slid a plate of brownies into my hands like it was medicine. Right about the first dance, two SUVs I knew too well rolled up. Out stepped code enforcement. Different guys, different clipboards, and, of course, Karen. Camera lit like a lighthouse. I met the officers by the gravel. Permits, copied and tucked behind my smile. They read. They nodded. They said, "Have a great evening." Karen sputtered. Noise. One of the officers tilted his head to the music, soft, respectful. Joy, heavy but not loud, and said, "Ma'am, this is within allowable decibels." You could feel the crowd exhale. The bride wiped a tear that had almost become a memory she'd hate. Karen stood there, stranded, holding a rule that nobody was buying. When she finally stormed off, the whole place held quiet for a beat. Then the band kicked into a Motown classic and the floorboards answered back. If hope has a sound, it's friends clapping on 2 and 4 while a bully's taillights get small. The next week, the HOA board posted minutes from the emergency meeting. The language looked polished. Too polished for the people I knew. So I asked around, and a board member named Darlene, who wore floral skirts and the yearbook smile of a retired guidance counselor, asked if we could talk quietly. We sat on my back steps, shells of sunflower seeds making a constellation at our feet. Darlene's hands shook slightly, like she was balancing 3 truths at once. Sorry, the board keeps changing minutes after we approve them, she said. Edits show up we never voted on. And when I ask, Karen says it's formatting. Darlene swallowed. I ain't brave, Marcus, but I'm not blind. I asked if she'd keep copies. She had. And there it was, 2 versions of the same meeting, one real, one rewritten. The real one showed a vote failing. The public version showed it passing by a slim margin. Ain't that something? It was like watching someone impersonate democracy with a Sharpie. Now, I'm not the sheriff of everybody's ethics. But math is math. If your vote fails, you don't get to change the scoreboard after the buzzer. I typed up a gentle, pointed letter, with Darlene's blessing, asking the board to reconcile the versions. I CC'd the neighborhood, the county liaison, and, by accident, a reporter who'd left me a voicemail promising they'd fact-check every breath. No accusations. Just questions. Questions have a way of multiplying when sunlight hits. That's when Preston stopped pretending he didn't care. He called. "Let's meet, man to man," he said. Voice dipped in honey and hurry. We sat under the pergola at a cafe that served latte art shaped like hearts. Oh, the irony. He pitched something he called mutual relief. He'd acquire an edge of my property, just the underutilized acres. He said. Like calling a rib underutilized, 'cause you haven't chewed it yet. In exchange, he'd influence the HOA to back off. He even floated a donation to a local church. Eyes soft as a well-aimed bribe. I smiled so hard my face cramped and said, "Preston, I'm placing a conservation easement on the vineyard." He blinked. Twice. Conservation easement, a promise recorded forever that the land stays land, no subdivisions. No carve-ups. No mutual relief parcels. I'd started the paperwork the same week I found the historic designation. Calling a land trust run by a woman who can quote soil statistics like nursery rhymes. We were close. Very close. Preston leaned back like I'd shown him a mirror he didn't order. "You'll never raise enough," he said. "You sure?" I asked. "People give to what they can see. They see these vines every day." He shrugged, tossed cash on the table, and left with a smirk that wanted to be a smile. We turned the next Saturday into a tasting/fundraiser. Neighbor style. No black tie. No auction paddles. You pay what you can, you eat what we've got. Kids painted grape leaves on butcher paper and learned the word terroir in between popsicles. A fiddler named Joe made the air swing. People put bills in jars. Checks in shoeboxes. A guy I used to help haul firewood slipped a crumpled envelope in my palm and said, "Don't count it till you're home." It was the last cash from a coffee can his mama kept for a rainy day. We cried in a hug that probably looked silly from the road. By twilight, the land trust director, Miss Ida Dean, braid like a rope and eyes like cliffs, cleared her throat on a hay bale and said the words that cracked something open in me. We hit the number. The easement would record by midweek. The cheers rolled across the rows like thunder the sky didn't have to make. Karen posted, that night, dangerous precedent. Special treatment. Outsiders funding chaos. Outsiders lady. It was the town. The same folks buying fundraiser pies and borrowing my ladder. Her post got likes from the usual suspects and a smattering of bots that would buy sunglasses from a scarecrow. Then, 3 comments down, Darlene wrote, "Transparency matters." A simple sentence that read like a door opening in a locked hallway. The HOA met again. Public this time. Because apparently we all like to watch a pot boil. I sat in the back. Hat off. Hands folded. The good copies in a manila folder, like Ethel told me. Karen called the meeting to order with the authority of a flight attendant who's decided you look like a problem. She accused me of grandstanding and weaponizing technicalities. She rolled out a chart about declining serenity metrics. I didn't laugh. I wanted to. But, I didn't. Then Mr. Whitaker, retired sergeant. Knee brace. Baseball cap. That seen more summers than my tractor, stood with the help of a cane and said, "You find me for a flag bracket, that's been on my porch longer than your minivan payments." The room tilted toward him like flowers to sun. "You find my neighbor for a rose trellis. You've sent letters to widows for the color of their mulch." He pointed the cane gently. "Like a teacher. This ain't community, ma'am. This is control." What happened next moved like a summer storm slow. Then, all at once, someone called for a vote to recall the board. People whispered about bylaws and thresholds. Darlene stood and read the rules correctly. If enough signatures gathered, we could hold a special vote within 30 days. Folks lined up by the coffee urn with pens borrowed from purses and pockets. Miguel fetched clipboards. Sarah answered questions about water usage like a professor in a cornfield. Even the guy who grills hot dogs outside the feed store on Saturdays hauled in a tray like a deacon at communion. By the time the janitor flicked the lights, we had more than enough names, real names. Not the rushed scribbles you see at concerts. Karen walked out, stiff and straight. Like anger was a corset. Preston didn't show. He'd stopped liking rooms he couldn't script. The signature verification process dragged by design, I suspect. But the date came anyway. Special election. Paper ballots. The thick kind that make you feel like a citizen again. Barrel waited outside with Rosie's grandson, who taught him to give a paw in exchange for apple slices. Inside, people shook hands like truce and talked about paint colors like they were metaphors for something bigger. Votes were counted in piles that rustled like leaves. A hush fell so soft you could hear someone open a mint. Then the tally the board recalled. Every seat. A slate of neighbors, Darlene, Mr. Whitaker, a young dad named Evan who can fix anything with duct tape and a YouTube video sworn in with hands that trembled and smiles that didn't. Karen exited, stage left. No speech, no bow, just a rustle of silk and the smell of a perfume that, I swear, now reminds me of toner. If you're waiting for fireworks, here's the human-sized version policy change. The new board cut the nonsense fines. They put front porch help hours on Saturdays. Volunteers fixing mailbox posts instead of ticketing them. They turned the Facebook panopticon into an actual bulletin board made of wood and tape, with recipes and babysitter numbers, and a handwritten note that said, "Anyone missing a rooster, he's friendly but opinionated." And yet, don't put away your popcorn. Preston still had permits filed in other corners. Old projects hanging like cobwebs that can catch flies for years. The state folks kept asking questions. The bank's hold notes grew from whispers to full paragraphs. A local paper ran a series called Land, Law, and the Lines Between, with my face only in silhouette, 'cause, frankly, I prefer grapes to cameras. One heavy dusk I remember because the sky looked bruised. Karen stopped her white SUV at my gate. She didn't get out. Window rolled down just enough for a voice to escape. "You won't win," she said, softer than I'd ever heard her. "You think you did. But men like you go back to dirt." I wanted to say I never left. That dirt is where I heal. That soil is where laughter and grief both go to ground and come back up as food. But I just tipped my hat. She drove off. And for the first time, I wondered if she was less a villain than a mirror, showing what fear can do when it puts on pearls. The easement recorded the next morning. Miss Ida texted a photo of the county stamp official as Thunder. We framed a copy and hung it in the tasting room between my granddad's faded harvest photo and a kid's crayon drawing of a tractor that looks, nothing like mine, but everything like joy. Harvest came on like a hymn. We picked in the cool before sunrise. Hands sticky with juice and joke. The crusher sang. The air turned purple with promise. We sent the first fermenters off with a whispered do right by us, like my granddad used to do when no one was around to tease him. Weddings folded into harvest dinners. Long tables under longer shadows. Wine in mason jars, because we ran out of fancy stemware. Nobody minded. It tasted just as sweet. Then, because bullies rarely retire, presto, a letter arrived from an out-of-town firm hungry for billable hours. They claimed my new barn built to replace the hail-battered old one violated a sightline covenant nobody had mentioned in living memory. The tone said, "We will grind you." I poured coffee, read it twice, and sent it to Jake with a single line, "Ball or strike," he wrote back. Not even in the same sport. We answered. Cool and clean. The covenant referenced an older map with different boundaries. My barn stood squarely legal. And the new board wrote a letter in support that read like a neighbor's handshake. The firm backed off. Slow and sulky. Then, faster. Like the invoice clock had somewhere else to be. The last time I saw Karen up close was at the fall festival. The new board revived a simple thing pie contest. Bluegrass band. Pumpkin walk. She stood by the kettle corn, watching kids chase bubbles like they were catching daylight in their fists. Darlene walked over, handed her a cup of cider, and said something I couldn't hear. Karen nodded once, twice. Her face softened a notch. Just enough that I recognized a person under the position. She sipped. She left before the raffle. I don't know if she smiled. Maybe that's not the point. Me, I stood by the fence, shoulder to shoulder with folks who'd become something more than neighbors. Barrow leaned into my hip, eyes half closed. The picture of a creature who knows where he belongs. I breathed deep, the smell of leaves and cinnamon and wood smoke, and thought, this is what a town should feel like. Messy, kind, stubborn enough to outlast a headline. So, what would you do if your HOA tried to write over your life with a rule and a grin? Would you fold to keep the peace? Or would you, knock on doors, bring cookies, read the fine print, and build a table long enough for people with nothing in common but an address? Anyone else had an HOA pulled back into being human again because of regular folks doing regular brave things? Drop your story. Someone out there needs your map. What if the next envelope on your porch wasn't a warning, but a lien notice? Like boom, somebody tried to slap a debt on your title you never owed. Would you panic? Or would you get louder? Paper by paper. First frost came early, whitening the grass, like the world exhaled talc. I was in the barn making a list that had more verbs than comfort, ferment, punchdowns, heater checks, invoices that needed stamps when I heard Barrel bark, his serious bark. Mail truck. A Manila envelope. The return address had that law firm hum of copperplate fonts and billable hours. Notice of intent to place assessment, lien. I read the line twice, 'cause my brain, all stir, is the Janet, refused. They'd backdated violations from the old board, unauthorized events, unapproved structures, excess traffic, a greatest hits album of things we'd already proven lawful. The dollar amount had commas. The threat, a lien that could spook lenders, poison a refinance, or jam any future sale. You don't gotta sell to be scared of a cloud over your deed. I brewed coffee strong enough to file its own taxes, and called Jake. He whistled. Low. Classic scare letter. He said. But if they try to record, it becomes slander of title in my opinion. He told me to breathe. To document. To not under any lure, send a partial payment. Predators love a check. It smells like you admitted something. Within the hour, Darlene and Evan from the new board were at my kitchen table. Cheeks pink from the cold. Eyes hot. We didn't authorize this, Darlene said, voice trembling like a plucked string. Looks like the prior board's counsel went rogue with continuity authority. She made air quotes like she wanted to snap the air in half. We went full flashlight in a basement. Evan dug through the HOA's email vault and found the breadcrumb trail. An outgoing message from Karen's old counsel to a P. Creston Stever, a jury. Box templates for post-recall enforcement. A spreadsheet of targets. Not just me. A widow on Cedar Way for her porch swing. A veteran for his flag bracket, Mr. Whitaker had mentioned. A single mom for a basketball hoop that, no joke, folded flat. It wasn't governance. It was a list. Sunrise field trip, I said. Words arriving before fear could. We texted. Called. Knocked doors. By dawn, a convoy of pickups and hatchbacks idled outside my gate. Exhaust puffing, like cattle breath. We drove to the county recorder's office with thermoses and a plate of Rosie's lemon bars big enough to make peace treaties. Ethel, queen of the courthouse, peeked over her bifocals when we walked in. You brought half the valley, she said. Hide-and-seek smile. We slid over the rogue notice and the board's written disavowal. Ethel stamped a provisional notice of dispute so fast the ink blushed. If anyone tries to record a lien on these grounds, she said, they'll trip this flag and meet a judge who had cold coffee. Bless that woman. Jake filed the slander of title threat letter with the kind of footnotes that put fear into people who wear cufflinks at breakfast. The new board issued an emergency resolution canceling any pre-recall enforcements not ratified by them. Darlene called a town hall to explain in plain English that a homeowners association ain't a private fiefdom. It's a volunteer group with duties, not daggers. That night, I walked the rows till my toes went numb. Frost clung to wires like glitter that forgot it was pretty. Barrel snuffled in rabbit tracks. Pretending he was a wolf with a day job, I thought about how fast power can go feral when nobody's watching. I thought about my granddad, who believed the law could be a fence that kept coyotes out instead of neighbors in. I whispered, we're trying. Like a confession. Morning brought a rumor with the speed of gossip on roller skates. Karen was hosting a neighborhood safety roundtable at a clubhouse 2 neighborhoods over. Not our HOA, another one. Guest speaker on property value threats. The flyer said. The graphic, a vineyard clip art with thorns. Subtle. I went. Saturday, in back. Hat low. Karen took the mic in a blazer that could cut bread. She talked about encroaching commercial interests. About rural blight. She said words like precedent and decline with the cadence of a sermon nobody asked for. A few heads nodded. A few eyes glazed. Then a hand went up, woman in a denim jacket with a baby on her hip. My parents got married at that farm, she said. It's where my dad got sober. 'Cause he catered there instead of drinking. So I'm just, confused. What's the danger again? Silence performs miracles when it arrives in the right room. Karen stumbled through something about traffic. A retired teacher God bless that profession, said the farm hosts carpools and hires teens and lends out tables for block parties. If that's danger, she said, I'd like more of it. I left quietly. Not triumphing, just tired. Anger is a sugar rush. Community is protein. One burns fast. One holds you. Winter tightened. The vineyard went skeletal and beautiful, like bone under skin. We pruned. We fixed what winds bullied. We wrote checks we didn't enjoy writing and stretched dollars like pizza dough. The tasting room kept weekend hours neighbors telling stories with their elbows on cedar. Laughter fogging the windows. On Sundays, we turned the barn into a coat swap. Bring what you can. Take what you need. People who'd never met learned each other's favorite soups. I saw a man who once signed Karen's petition knit a scarf for a little boy he didn't know. That'll mess you up in the good way. One evening, Evan jogged up the driveway with a grin he couldn't cage. We found it, he said, waving a thumb drive like a found pearl. The prior board's executive session recordings, the ones they said didn't exist, were backed up to a forgotten cloud folder. The audio wasn't pretty, strategizing fines as behavior shaping, joking about chasing out the stubborn ones, discussing aligning with developer timelines. I ain't a saint, but hearing neighbors reduced to obstacles will light a fuse in you. We didn't leak it. We did something steadier. The new board hired an outside parliamentarian neutral. No Valley ties to review governance. She arrived with a binder and eyebrows that suggested she'd wrangled worse. Her report came back with 3 colors of sticky notes and one conclusion. The prior board appears to have operated ultra-vires outside its authority, a phrase that sounds like a fancy dessert but means no. The new board voted to publish the findings, to invite training, to put term limits into bylaws so no one grows roots in a chair they should only borrow. Karen posted twice that day, once in fury, once in wounded pride. Comments landed like snow soft. Some sympathetic, some sharp. I kept my mouth shut online, 'cause keyboards ain't where reconciliation lives. Preston, however, started popping up in places he'd avoided: county meetings, water district forums, trying hard to look civic and not stranded. He filed for a minor modification on a stalled permit, a phrase that often does major things. Sarah read the graphs, whistled. They'll try to call this small, she said, when it's the size of a promise. Jake drafted objections with more math than poetry. And Miguel gathered folks who rarely speak at microphones to speak anyway. Ordinary voices in a room lined with microphones can reroute a river. The vote went against Preston. Tight, but clear. He left with that brittle half-smile. A man whose map no longer matched the ground. A week later, I saw Karen again at the grocery. By the apples. She stared at Fuji versus Gala like either could fix her winter. I almost walked past. Then, because I'm either foolish or stubborn, I stopped. Want the good ciders? I asked. They tuck 'em on the bottom row. She blinked. Defensive. Then, tired. I grew up without much, she said. Words spilling like she didn't expect them. We finally got a nice house. I wanted to keep it nice. She glanced at me. Then the apples. I went too far. There was a fork in the air. Vengeance lives at one prong, decency at the other. I ain't noble, but I'm trying. Your idea of nice and mine are different, I said, gentle as I could. But hey, we're stuck as neighbors. Maybe we can try being less stuck. She gave a short nod that looked like it hurt. I heard about the coat swap, she said. I dropped off a bag. Didn't put my name. Then she left. Shoulders small, like the coat she wore wasn't hers. I walked out to a sky the color of dishwater, and thought about how villains don't usually know they're villains when they're busy being afraid. Doesn't excuse a thing, but it explains some. By early spring, buds popped like the vineyard was typing in green. We hosted a tools and tea day fix-it stations with Evan and Mr. Whitaker showing how to mend a fence post, how to hang a storm door without cursing in front of kids. Darlene ran a table labeled forms, but friendly, helping folks with hardship waivers and paint approvals. The new board published a quarterly ledger. Dollars in, dollars out. No mysteries. You'd be amazed how fast drama fades when people can read numbers without squinting. Then, because life likes a third act, a letter arrived on county letterhead, a formal notice that the state AG's office was, in fact, reviewing certain development filings from prior years. Not my fight alone. Bigger. Broader. The kind of thing that takes seasons. Not news cycles. I read it on the porch with Barrel's head in my lap, and a feeling I can only call relief braided with dread. You want the truth. You also want to sleep. We threw a spring fete that wasn't fancy. Just ours. Kids hung paper blossoms from twine. Miss Ida told stories about farms saved by love and law. Sarah passed around a jar of soil and said, "This is older than your grandmother and smarter than all of us." Miguel prayed we'd stay stubborn in the right ways. We poured a new vintage that tasted like red fruit and clean air. Folks clinked glasses to ordinary good. Late that night, after the last lantern dimmed and the last joke landed, I stood alone by the fence. Coyotes yipped somewhere that wasn't my business. The vines whispered the soft sound of leaves doing math with moonlight. I thought about the first day the sirens came. About Karen's perfume and Preston's grin. About Ethel's stamp and Darlene's shaky courage. About how a town can either be a wall or a table. So yeah, what would you do if the letter on your porch tried to badge its way into your deed? Pay up to make it go away? Or show up at dawn with neighbors, thermoses, lemon bars, and a lady at the recorder's desk who knows the smell of nonsense? Anyone else beat back a bogus lien or a paper bully tactic from a board? Tell us how you did it. Who helped? What worked? What you wish you'd known sooner. Somebody scrolling right now is scared stiff. Your comment might be the first breath they take. What if the knock on your door wasn't a neighbor with sugar, but a process server with your name printed in bold? Do you freeze? Or do you put on coffee and start stacking truth like firewood? Early spring slid into honest warm. Bud break lit the rose in that tender green that makes even grumpy folks smile. I was in the shop tuning the old Massey when the knock came, 3 careful taps. Like manners, with paperwork. A woman in a blue blazer. Badge clipped low. Handed me a sealed packet and a half smile. "Sapoena, ducis tecum," she said. "Bring documents. Bring receipts. Bring the history." "Ma'am," I said, "you're gonna need a box." By sundown, the kitchen looked like a paper orchard. Contracts, emails, photos, copies stamped by Ethel so many times the ink had a memory. Jake stood by the sink. Sleeves rolled. Eyes lit the way only a lawyer's eyes light when the dots finally connect. Dr. Bennett flipped through soil charts. Color tabs like confetti. Father Miguel brewed a pot of coffee that could, I swear, sanctify a tractor. The subpoena wanted everything tied to event permits, boundary lines, noise checks, hose bib, backflow logs, down to the absurd. It read like someone expected to find a ghost in the plumbing. We labeled, numbered, wrote a calm cover letter that sounded like I wasn't shaking. Then we drove it to town, where a state investigator with soft hands and tough questions signed for the box and said, "Thank you for being organized." That sentence hit me like a benediction. You learn to ration hope. 2 days later, Darlene called. Special board session. She whispered, "Closed door, but transparent adjacent." She laughed. A quick, nervous sound. "We've been contacted too. Turns out the state wanted to see HOA minutes, emails, the revision history that showed how votes got formatted. Ultravirus had finally met its grown-up cousin oversight." Karen posted something at midnight, bold font, trembling grammar, about political witch hunts and persecution for loving her neighborhood. The comments split, like firewood. Half hang in there. Half, ma'am. Sit down. I didn't pile on. Internet fire pits don't warm actual rooms. Then the wind changed. Literally. A brush fire miles south jumped a ridge in an hour. Red engines screamed past the tasting room, lights painting the white barn in emergency colors. By afternoon, ash drifted like gray snow. Folks packed cars with photo albums and cat carriers. The valley turned into a convoy. Neighbors who didn't wave last month, now loading each other's boxes. HOA rules got real quiet when the horizon went orange. We turned the barn into a waypoint. Cots on the left, coffee on the right. The big fan pushing cooler air across tired faces. Rosie ran intake with the voice of a school principal who never lost a kid. Evan strung extension cords like he was weaving a net. Sarah taped handwritten signs, well water here, dog water there. Power strip share, please. And then, Lord help me, Karen walked in carrying 2 coolers and a bag of toddler toys. "Where should I put these?" she asked. Eyes red, but steady. "Right there by the cots," I said, pointing like it was the most normal sentence we'd ever exchanged. That night, with the ridge still pulsing, you could hear people whisper prayers in every dialect this valley knows. We laid out blankets. We took turns on watch. Barrel padded from cot to cot like a nurse with a tail. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, while I was refilling the big percolator, Karen stepped into the kitchen and said, "Very small. I'm sorry." She stared at the floor like the word might run away if she looked it in the eye. I wanted order. I turned it into control. "That's on me." "I didn't say." "I told you so." "I didn't say." "Now you get it." I handed her a mug and said, "Grab a stack of paper cups and start pouring." She did. We worked in a quiet that felt like a truce, stitched from smoke and honesty. By dawn, the wind fell. Fire crews carved black lines where orange teeth had been. Evac orders eased neighborhood by neighborhood. We sent people home with sack lunches and hugs. Our barn smelled like smoke and pancakes and second chances. In the parking lot, Karen hugged Darlene quick and awkward, like a kid learning a new muscle. She didn't look at me. That was okay. Some bridges take sunlight to cure. The week after the fire, the investigator called with a tone that said formal and friendly in the same breath. They needed follow-ups, clarifications, timestamps. One more copy of the agricultural exemption, with the old deeds map overlay. I set the phone down, closed my eyes, and thanked every boring day I'd ever spent labeling folders. Organization ain't sexy, but it's a shield. Preston, meanwhile, played chess with shadows. He filed a public op-ed titled Growth with Grace, name-checking schools and walkable neighborhoods. The phrases, developers keep in their back pockets like breath mints. He never named me. He didn't have to. The Valley can read between lines like it's a second language. But the stage had changed. Mothers who'd slept under our rafters, and grandfathers who'd eaten our smoked sweet eggs, read his words and wrote letters back polite, firm, signed with names and addresses. They didn't say never. They said, not like this. And not by erasing what remembers us. You could feel the oxygen shift. Power was learning the taste of pushback from people who mow their own lawns. Then came the day I'd been bracing for county hearing. Big room. Small chairs. Microphones that make even calm folks sound like they're testifying. The agenda stacked innocuous items like kindling, striping a cul-de-sac, approving a gazebo, then bam. The meaty thing. A motion to retroactively bless certain permits from prior years to promote continuity. I've seen that trick. Continuity means let yesterday's shortcuts graduate into tomorrow's precedent. We walked in like a choir, Jake, with his binders. Sarah, with posters. Miss Ida, with the easement certificate tucked like a talisman. Miguel, with written statements from families who'd lost wells to bad grading in other towns. Darlene sat beside Evan at the public table. HOA officials now acting like neighbors first. Preston spoke smooth, selling inevitability. Then he said the line that made the room lean forward. Opponents, to progress, are exploiting technicalities and fueling division. He looked right at me when he said it, smile like a blade in velvet. I stood, took a breath that tasted like dust and old varnish, and spoke slow. I'm not against homes. I said, I'm against shortcuts that turn neighbors into collateral damage. I held up the historic designation. The easement. The exemption. 3 pieces of paper that, together, say a valley can remember itself. These aren't technicalities. They're promises. Sarah pointed to a colored map, aquifers like sleeping rivers. Slopes that slip when you shave them wrong. Statistics that don't care about anyone's quarterly bonus. She didn't scold. She taught. The room nodded in that quiet, heavy way. People nod when truth isn't loud, but it's heavy enough to feel in your ribs. Then, the moment that changed the air, Darlene leaned into the mic and admitted the prior board's harm. No passive voice. No mistakes were made. Just, we were wrong. We let power turn mean. We're fixing it. You could hear chairs creak as people sat up straighter. Contrition is rare. Public contrition is a comet. The motion failed. Not by a landslide, by enough. Enough matters. That evening, I found Karen on my front steps. Hands jammed in a cardigan like she was shoving apologies back into the pockets they came from. I wanted to say thanks, she said, for during the fire. She lifted her chin, and I gave a statement. To the investigator. Her voice didn't wobble. Emails I shouldn't have sent. Things we pushed. She winced. I know what it might mean, but I don't want to be that story forever. I let the quiet hold us a second. Then I nodded. Truth's heavy, I said. but it builds. Spring deepened. The vines went from whisper to chorus. We hired 2 teens for the summer, one with a skateboard he treated like a passport. The other, who could coax tomatoes from gravel. Weddings returned vows under strings of lights. A dad crying into a handkerchief he swore was allergies. We kept the coat swap running, 'cause turns out, people need that year-round. And then the letter came, not the scary kind this time, but the kind printed on a weight of paper that feels like respect. The state thanked us for cooperation. Said their review had advanced. No fireworks. No verdicts. Just process. Paved with actual stones, instead of Facebook gravel. It was enough to make me breathe deeper than I had, since someone called grapes a menace at sunrise. Preston sold a parcel. Quiet as fog. Not the whole portfolio, just enough to suggest his compass was recalibrating. The buyer, a regional land trust partner. Planning a trail and a native plant corridor that'll stitch neighborhoods together with something softer than asphalt. I shook hands with a woman in hiking boots who talked about pollinators like they were royalty. She grinned at Beryl, who decided her shoelaces tasted like destiny. Last week, the new board launched Porch Saturdays. No fines. No citations. Just volunteers with tool belts and a borrowed post-hole digger fixing the little things that shame loves to exaggerate: leaning rails, sagging gates, a light fixture that blinks Morse code for help. Karen showed up with muffins. Nobody booed. A kid offered her a hammer. She took it like it might bite. Then learned how to sink a nail straight. Progress measured in inches, not inches of paperwork. We capped that day with tacos in the cul-de-sac and a sunset that went all sherbet on us. An old man told me he hadn't sat in a lawn chair with neighbors since his wife passed. A teen DJ'd from a phone balanced in a planter. Someone chalked a hopscotch grid that stretched longer than the HOA bylaws. Which, is saying something. Later. Moon up. I walked the fence line with Beryl, and the kind of tired that feels clean. I thought about sirens and subpoenas. About ash on milk crates, and apologies in cardigans. About what it takes to keep a place from becoming just a zip code. Turns out, it's not one hero with a speech. It's a mess of us farmers and teachers, clerks and engineers. A priest with calluses and a scientist with patient eyes showing up more often than bullies do. So what would you do if your HOA had the power to shrink you? Letter by letter. Would you let fear make you smaller, or would you fear make you smaller? You know. Get organized. Get neighbors. Get boring in the way that wins spreadsheets and sign-up sheets, and coffee that could wake the moon. Anybody else see a board go from hammer to helping hand, or wrestle a developer's inevitable into not so fast? Tell us. Tell it messy. Tell it true. Somebody's porch light is on, waiting for your map. What if the next safety upgrade your HOA pitched would have chained a gate right across the road your great-granddad laid with his own hands? I mean, picture waking up to find a keypad where your front gate used to be. And some committee deciding who gets the code to your life. The idea showed up on a Tuesday. Polite as a snake in a bow tie. Enhanced community security. The flyer said, renderings of a tasteful iron gate at the mouth of the old lane that's fed farms here since Elvis was on the radio. Fewer joyriders. Better insurance rates. Protect property values. It had all the right buzzwords and none of the truth. That lane is a public right-of-way with utility and ag easements braided through it like rope. You can't slap a dress code on a county road. Evan called first. It's a member petition, he said. voice tight. They got just enough signatures to force a vote. Not the new board's idea, more like a leftover fever dream from the old guard that finally found a clipboard and a weekend. I walked the lane at dusk, past the spot where my granddad used to park a truck bed full of watermelons for neighbors who paid with a wave and a promise. The gravel sang under my boots. Swallows cut the air. Barrel trotted like a mayor doing rounds. I pictured a gate there, steel. Keypad. Blinking red dot, and my chest went hot. A gate doesn't just stop cars. It says, "We own what you thought belonged to us all." We did what we've learned to do, turned anger into homework. By Thursday, my kitchen was a map shop. County plats. Easement overlays. The historic designation. The conservation easement. Every line that says this lane carries more than tires. I called Public Works. The deputy director, a woman named Lila with braids and a laugh like wind chimes, pulled the right drawers. "That road's public all the way to your west fence," she said. Easement stacked on easement. Anyone tries to pinch it, they'll meet statutes older than my grandmother's biscuit recipe. We held a map night in the barn. Not fancy folding tables. Sharpies. Cider. Sarah taped up big prints and circled the magic words, ingress and egress. Lila came after hours. Out of uniform but full of clarity. She explained like a neighbor. Not a bureaucrat. You can add traffic calming, she said. Tapping, a legend. You cannot choke a public lane. People nodded, slow as it sank in. Rights are only mysterious until someone explains them with a pen and a cookie. Still, fear's persuasive. A few folks wanted the gate anyway. Break-ins, 2 neighborhoods over, had jitters running laps in their heads. "I just want my kids safe," Dad said, twisting his cap brim like it owed him money. Gates feel like safety. Feel like, Sarah echoed. Gentle. She pulled up a study, plain English version, showing crime displaces. Doesn't disappear. And gates mostly trap delivery drivers and make firefighters swear. Then, Lila added the part that landed also. If you gate a public lane, our trucks lose time. Seconds matter when your kitchen is on fire. Evan proposed a compromise, not a gate, but eyes and light. Motion lights at the tricky bend. A radar sign that flashes slow down instead of taking pictures. Neighborhood watch, that actually means watch porch lights. Names learned. Phone trees rather than Snoop. We priced it in dollars. You can hold way less than an iron gate that'd have to be maintained till the end of anxiety. Which is never. Vote night came with spring rain. The kind that makes even brave people want to stay home. But folks came. Boots in puddles. Umbrellas like jellyfish. Inside the hall. Darlene set a table with ballots and brownies, because sugar bridges more divides than any speech. The petitioners made their pitch in tidy phrases. Insurance. Safety. Prestige. Then the mic passed to Lila, who said what needed saying. You can't gate what isn't yours to gate. It's funny how relief sounds exactly like an exhale. The measure failed. Not by a hair, by a healthy slice. The petitioners looked shocked. Like the weather had been personally rude. I didn't gloat. I shook hands and handed out the eyes and light sign-up sheet. Half the folks who'd wanted a gate wrote their names anyway. Turns out, people who fear the dark like being asked to hold a flashlight. We ordered the lights. The radar sign. The reflective house numbers a firefighter begged us to use. A retired electrician volunteered a Saturday, teaching teens how not to electrocute themselves. Karen, of all people, showed up with a box of bulbs and a carefully folded schematic she'd printed for the archives. She worked the clipboard quietly, taking down addresses and preferred brightness like a librarian of lumens. A week later, new letters landed, this time from the HOA's insurance carrier. Wildfire risk scoring update. Translation rates were hiking like a tourist who packed the wrong shoes. Part of it was the big burn down south and models that treat vines like shrubs instead of the living fire breaks they are. Part of it was a panic ripple through the market. The carrier strongly recommended stricter, defensible space rules clear everything combustible to a wide radius around structures. On paper, it sounded sensible. In practice, it can be chainsaw theater, scalping habitats, shaving beauty, and, if you're not careful, killing vines that keep flames low. The board called a workshop with the fire chief, a woman named Trina who carries calm like gear. She drew zones on a whiteboard: lean, clean, green within the first ring, smart thinning in the next. Beyond that, stewardship. Grass isn't the devil, she said. Ladders are. She pointed to a photo of shrubs under trees. Fire climbs. Remove the ladder. Sarah backed her up with data: vines hold moisture, slow flame, and done right work as fuel breaks. Don't punish the very thing that saved us, she said. You could see light dawn in people's eyes as defensible space shifted from clear-cut panic to surgical care. The board adopted a sensible plan: chip days instead of fines. Grants for seniors. A hotline for "is this okay?" photos answered by an actual human. We spent Saturdays mulching smart, not bald, pruning trees so they waved like ballerinas, instead of grabbing at roofs like teenagers trying to sneak back in. Somewhere in the middle of all that, a letter with a flat gray logo arrived for me. No perfume, no flourish, notice of hearing. It said, the state review was entering its next phase. Not a trial, more like a formal sit-down with microphones and stenographers who make every comma matter. I told myself not to shake my hands. Being attached to a human shook anyway. Jake prepped me like a coach who's also a friend. Facts, not fireworks, he said. Dates, not feelings. And if you don't know, you say you don't know. Sarah assembled exhibits like a museum of common sense: maps, soil studies, photos with dates burned in the corner, the old school way. Miguel gathered written statements from neighbors who'd seen pressure before and after, and how it bent lives. The day arrived wearing crisp air and quiet shoes. A hearing room with a flag, a seal, and the kind of chairs that make you sit up straight. I took the oath. The questions were tough but fair: how I knew what I knew, when I knew it. Who told me what, where? I answered slow. To the best of my recollection, became a sentence stem I leaned on like a rail. Then Karen's turn. I watched her walk up in a simple sweater, hair pulled back, no armor. She spoke softly. No grandstanding, no teeth. She admitted emails she regretted, meetings she'd run like a drumline when they should have been a circle. She described the night of the fire and the morning after, how fear had shrunk her world, an apology had made room again. I thought I was protecting, she said. I was punishing. The stenographer wrote every word. The room didn't breathe for a beat. I ain't naive. Regret doesn't erase harm, but it can. Sometimes, Start building a bridge back to human. The panel thanked her. The way grown-ups thank other grown-ups when a hard thing's been said out loud. Outside the hearing, on a bench that had seen too many nervous lunches, Karen sat and stared at a tree like it was teaching her. I might move, she said suddenly. Not looking at me. Preston's stepping back. I'm tired of being a headline in a place I still love. She lifted a shoulder. We'll see. Whatever you choose, I said. Leave the place softer. She nodded. A small one. The kind that actually means yes. Summer came on like a choir. Vines leafed out, berries, marble-sized, the air tasting like green apples. We hosted a night of thanks in the lane we'd kept open, a long table laid right down the middle. A permission received, and ribbons hung so the sheriff didn't roll his eyes. Lila came with her kids. Chief Trina came with a casserole that could convince enemies to share a spoon. Ethel brought a pie labeled Statute 742. And we all hooted. Darlene led a toast that wasn't flowery. Just plain. To the work we decided to do together. The radar sign blinked slow down at a pickup that had forgotten. The driver waved, embarrassed, and eased his foot. Nobody needed a gate. We had eyes. We had light. We had names for each other. Later that week, a different kind of envelope found me, handwritten. Cornflower blue. Inside, a note from the widow on Cedar Way. They took the lean thread off my record. It said, I slept a full night for the first time in months. Thank you. Sometimes, victory is a stamped release you can clip to your fridge with a magnet shaped like a chicken. Sometimes, it's the light on a neighbor's porch staying on all the way till dawn. Of course. There's always one more pebble in the boot. A new rumor, a short-term rental investor sniffing around the valley's edges, trying to turn a cul-de-sac into a check-in desk. The HOA can't outlaw life, but it can set rhythms. The board wrote rules that sounded like common sense instead of control caps. Quiet hours. An emergency contact who actually answers at 2 in the morning when a smoke alarm chirps. Folks grumbled a little, then shrugged. Boundaries feel a lot like freedom when they're drawn with a steady hand. I've learned this. The opposite of a bully board isn't no board. It's a board that knows it's a custodian, not a crown. A board that sends a kid with a hammer before it licks a stamp. A board that remembers a neighborhood is not a brand. It's a bowl of borrowed sugar and jump starts and front porch funerals when we can't think what else to do. One evening, when the sky went sherbet again because summer likes an encore, I found the old fence post where my granddad carved initials, his and my grandma's, and a date I had to sound out like a password. I traced it with a thumb. The wood is tired but stubborn. Same as me. Barrel leaned against my knee. Sighing. The sigh of a creature whose job is done even when it isn't. So if your HOA showed up with a solution that looked like a gate across a shared road, would you nod because gates feel safe? Or would you stay, unroll the maps, learn the lines, and trade fear for light bulbs and names? Would you shave your land bald to please an algorithm or call the fire chief? Learn the zones, and make your place both beautiful and ready. Anybody else turned a bad idea into a better plan by replacing fences with faces? Tell us how you did it, what maps you pulled. Who drew the first circle on the whiteboard? Which Saturday changed the neighborhood? Somebody out there staring at a rendering of a gate right now. And your comment might be the bolt cutter they need. What if, instead of a scandal, your story ended with a blueprint that other neighborhoods could steal? Borrow. and build from. Imagine the mess you lived through, turning into the manual you wish you'd had on day one. I was rinsing bins behind the barn when the phone buzzed with a number that looked official enough to make your shoulders square. The state panel's clerk, voice steady, said they'd be issuing findings and recommendations within a fortnight. No fireworks. Just the slow crush of process. I set the phone down and watched a drop of water wobble on the rim of a hose nozzle till it fell. Funny how relief in real life is quiet. Like a screen door closing soft. 2 mornings later, the mail brought a thick envelope that landed on the doormat with a thud you could feel in your teeth. The panel's letter read like a map of everything we'd crawled through: record-keeping reforms for HOAs, clear training requirements for boards, and a voluntary compliance plan for developers whose paperwork had, in their words, fallen short of statutory clarity. No confessionals. No villains in handcuffs. Just consequences and a clock. Fines for the sloppy filings. Audits. A mandate to fix drainage on a hillside where rushes died after bulldozers chewed too close. It wasn't vengeance. It was maintenance. I ain't gonna lie, I wanted headlines. Maybe a quote that said, "We were right," with a trumpet behind it. Instead, I got paragraphs that will outlast any headline by years. The panel also recommended counties adopt a plain English good neighbor notice whenever dense developments pop next to working land, so newcomers learn, before closing, what a tractor at sunrise sounds like, what a smudge pot smells like, what the word harvest requires from patience. That one made me smile into my coffee. Less shock. More truth, at the front door. Preston called the same afternoon, no lawyer on the line. No lemon glaze on the words. He said he'd sign the compliance plan. Said he'd fund the drainage fix. The native plant corridor. And some money for the volunteer fire department. The tone wasn't heroic. It was tired. Maybe humbled. Or maybe I'm projecting grace where there was just necessity. Either way, the valley would get repairs instead of press releases. The new board called a community meeting to walk folks through the letter. Darlene held up a 1-page "What changes for us" sheet, so nobody had to swim the legalese. Evan ran a projector, like a teacher on back-to-school night, clicking through deadlines and checklists, and which office handles what. No gloating. No gotchas. Karen sat 3 rows back, a canvas tote at her feet, listening so hard you could hear it. When the floor opened, a hand went up, a man I didn't recognize. Ball cap with a logo from somewhere east of the Mississippi. "I moved here last fall," he said, clearing his throat. "Where I'm from, HOA means lawn police. Seeing y'all run it like neighbors, that's new. It's good." He scratched his cheek. Sheepish. I brought cookies. Laughter ruffled the room like a breeze through cottonwoods. We decided to do a thing no one expects from a place with bylaws. We threw a hooray for boring party paperwork you can trust. Maps that match the ground. Neighbors who now know which office to call before they panic. Long tables on the public lane we kept open. Potluck with more casseroles than sense. Chief Trina cut a ribbon on the radar sign. And it blinked a smug little slowdown at a grandma who was not, in fact, speeding, but laughed and tapped the brakes anyway. Miss Ida from the Land Trust unveiled a small bronze plaque on a cedar post by the gate. Thornfield easement forever farmed. Forever shared. Folks ran their fingers over the word forever like it might rub off if we weren't careful. Ethel held court by the lemonade, telling teenagers that land records outlive trends. And one kid asked for a courthouse tour like it was a field trip to a dragon's lair. I love this town. Near dusk. The band struck up something old enough to have lived on radio tubes. And couples danced between chalked hopscotch squares. Kids refused to give up. Barrel did his rounds, accepting fries, with the moral seriousness of a diplomat. Karen hovered at the edge like a person learning how to stand in a photo with strangers who might become friends. Darlene waved her in. Karen hesitated, then stepped into the frame. Gonna take time, she murmured to nobody, and to everybody. But I'm trying. Her voice didn't wobble. The sentence wore work boots. It would be pretty to say that after that, the valley lived in all sunshine. Real life doesn't do all sunshine. A fence leans. A letter from a distant investor confuses a cul-de-sac for a cash register and needs a firm nope with citations. A raccoon figures out how to open the compost lid and teaches two others the dark art. But the engine of the place changed from adrenaline to rhythm. We took the mess we'd mapped and built something shareable. A few of us started a monthly HOA school in the barn, yes. I know. Thrilling name, where we teach the greatest hits, how to read a deed without taking a nap, what ingress, egress, tattooed on a plat actually means, how to write a bylaw in English instead of an ancient scroll, when to call the county, how to hold a meeting where nobody cries. We put handouts online. Free. Printable. No email capture. 'Cause there's people out there fighting alone tonight who don't need a newsletter. They need a plain answer. Sarah leads a workshop called Firewise Without the Chainsaw. Tantrum photos of smart pruning. Lists for the first zone. The second. The third. Chief Trina demos how to read your roof like it's a story full of verbs. Shed. Resist. Deflect. Miguel holds a circle called How Do We Fight Fair, where he names the sin of treating neighbors like enemies and the discipline of stepping away from the keyboard. Jake does Paper Tigers and Real Teeth, which is funnier than it sounds and teaches you the difference fast. So a threat letter stops feeling like a storm and starts feeling like weather you can dress for. We also built a little thing that ain't little. The Lane Covenant, not legal covenant, but neighbor covenant printed, signed, and taped in the clubhouse. No gates on public right-of-way. Eyes and light before fear and fences. Help before fines. Term limits. Posted ledgers. Open doors. It's not a law. It's a promise. Those often hold better because shame works faster than a summons when someone tries to wiggle out. A magazine out of the city sent a writer who drank our coffee, took too many photos of Barrel, and wrote a piece titled, The Vineyard That Told an HOA No and Taught a Valley Yes. I read it with a weird lump in my throat. Flattering. Sure. But what I loved was the comments, folks, all over the map saying, we're gonna try a map night. Ordering a radar sign. Starting coat swap weekend. Term limits on the ballot next month. Like seeds blowing across a fence and deciding to root. That'll get you misty. Even if you pretend dust is the reason. As for Karen, she put the house up. Then took it down. Then left the sign in the garage a week, like she was rehearsing. One evening, she knocked on my door with a thin folder. Correspondence I didn't send to you. She said, I'm giving it now. Old drafts of sharp letters she'd written and holstered. A note to herself that said, ask. Don't accuse. She laughed at that line. Small and rueful. I'm learning late. She said. You're learning. I said. That's the part that matters. She still posts sometimes photos of flowers. A recipe that failed and made her laugh. A request for a volunteer to help a neighbor whose porch step rotted through. No lectures about serenity metrics. No grainy surveillance of somebody else's Tuesday. It's a different voice. Not a saint's voice. A person's. I keep thinking about my granddad's hands, grit in the lines. Humor in the knuckles. He used to say, "There's two kinds of fences. Boy. The ones that keep out coyotes, and the ones people build to feel big." Took me too many years to learn which is which. Now when I walk the rows at first light, I feel the right kind of fences, doing quiet work, keeping deer off the Pinot, keeping kids safe from ditches, keeping lanes open, so ambulances don't play maze games. And I feel the other fences we took down: fear, secrecy, that cliquey little narc habit of writing rules for problems we didn't have. Harvest rolled back around. Our first, under the easements, forever. We picked before dawn, headlamps blinking like stars fallen to earth. Volunteers came with thermoses and jokes. Teens sang off-key and didn't care. Sarah's lab class from the college walked a transect and found ladybugs where we'd planted native yarrow. Chief Trina snuck in, "Ate tus cones," and claimed she'd been inspecting safety. Karen stacked crates. Didn't try to run anything. Just lifted what was in front of her. We made a wine we named Common Ground. Not a marketing trick, more like a thank you bottled. On the back label, we printed 5 lines. Lane stays open. Help before fines. Maps before rumors. Light over fear. Forever means forever. We poured the first glasses at sunset, toasting in a circle that looked like a family you get to pick. It tasted like red fruit and rain remembered. I set one plastic cup on the fence post with my grandparents' carved initials and said, "For you." Like a fool talking to ghosts. Barrel wagged for no reason I could see. Do I wish none of this had happened? I'd pick quiet over sirens every time. But would I give back what we built because of it? Not a chance. The valley knows itself better. The board knows its place on the ladder down here with us. Not up there with a crown. And folks who'd barely nod in a grocery aisle now know each other's dogs' names, and who makes the good brownies, and who to text when the wind changes. So, what would you do if your HOA story could end with a manual instead of a scar? Would you tuck it all away and try to forget? Or would you, write it down? Share the handouts. Teach a Saturday class with coffee that's too strong and jokes that are too bad, and maybe hand a radar sign wrench to the next town over. Anybody out there already hosting your own HOA school? Or drawing a lane covenant in crayon on a whiteboard in a clubhouse that smells like old coffee? Drop your tips. What's your help before fines version? How did you talk your board off a gate and into a porch light? Your note might be the blueprint someone prints at midnight when a weird envelope hits their doormat.